G'day, folks, and welcome to another episode of Encounters Down Under. Kim joins the show to tell us about his frightening experience after being woken up by a bright light coming through his window and the overwhelming fear that overtook him as he tried to escape. So please welcome to the show, Kim. Welcome there, Kim. You there, mate?
Hello, how you going?
Good, mate. Good. How about yourself?
Yeah, good, thanks.
That's the go, mate.
Thank you very much for having me on.
No, mate. No worries. Pleasure having you on here, mate. So you've had a little bit of an experience there a few years ago, or a fair while now. What are we, about 16, 15, 16 or something like you were saying? And obviously, mate, you take it away, mate. You tell us about
All right, so yeah, a long time ago now, about 25 years ago, a bit over 25 years. I was a sort of a mid to late teenage years, I reckon, 17 or 18 years old, living with my parents in a little seaside town called Primrose Sands in southern Tasmania. And I lived out the back in a bungalow, or like a small shed. It just had the one door and one small slatted window. And I used to spend my nights out there playing video games or watching the TV.
Yep.
And so basically, one night when I'd been sitting up fairly late playing video games, maybe about midnight, I think I crawled into bed, and I'd been asleep for a couple of hours, and then I woke up very tired because I'd gone to bed so late and sort of half asleep and a bit sort of dazed, to notice that my room was lit up quite brightly. There was light outside, and I had curtains covering the window, but they were only made of thin, cheap material, so the light was coming through the window. And there was a strange sound as well, not a loud noise, but sort of like a deep rumble or a humming sort of sound coming from outside. And being half asleep and sort of confused as to what was going on, I tried to put together what it could possibly have been, and the only thing I could sort of think of was that maybe my father was outside moving about with the bright spotlight that he owned. As for the noise, I sort of couldn't really work out what that was, but all I could think of with such a bright light coming in through the curtains is that for some reason he was outside shining the spotlight in through the window. And so I turned away facing the wall, sort of covering my eyes up, and yelled out, what's going on? And I didn't get any kind of reply. And then as I was sort of waking properly and rolling back over, I could start to sort of sense it was very strange, and that didn't seem to be what was happening at all. And I got up out of bed, and I had a bedside table that sits right underneath the slatted window, so I couldn't step right over to the window immediately. So I just reached across and pulled the curtains apart. And when I did, I couldn't even see, like my eyes couldn't adjust. It was sort of like waking up in a very dark room and being thrust straight out into the bright sunlight. I couldn't see anything immediately. And then as my eyes adjusted, I could see the bush. We lived in an area where we had two spare blocks either side and the bush behind. And I could see the bush, but it was bright, like brighter than daylight. And my eyes were struggling, but I could see things outside. And I started to notice this really deep sort of rumbling, humming noise. My senses were starting to sharpen as I was waking up properly, and I started to feel a bit unnerved, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. So I leant over the table to get my face up close to the window and put my face down low on the window to try and look up. And when I did, the sky was just blinding. I mean, completely blinding. I stepped back away. It sort of almost hurt my eyes. I couldn't see anything momentarily. I let my curtains sort of fall back down, covering the window. And I stood inside my room, rubbing my eyes, and my sort of eyes came back to normal. And I started to really focus then on this noise, or it was like a very low frequency sort of rumbling, humming noise, as I said, but you could feel it. It wasn't extremely loud, but I could feel like the vibration sort of through my skin, and it sort of felt like my whole room was just ever so slightly, rattling or vibrating. And so I found myself standing in the middle of my room, starting to get a bit scared, trying to figure out what was going on. And I didn't go back over to the window to try and open it again. I sort of started to panic, and I thought about sort of popping my door open and trying to make a 20-meter dash inside. Looking back in hindsight, I don't know why I didn't have the thought to want to step outside and look up, but I'd sort of gone into a bit of a panic. And I approached my door and was thinking about popping it open and trying to make a run for the back door of the house. And I just couldn't do it. I just became overcome with fear. And this noise seemed to be intensifying, and the vibrations seemed to be intensifying. And without being able to go outside and see it, it just felt like something really, really big was just above the shed that I was in. And I started sort of scrambling about, not really knowing what to do. And I just became overwhelmed with this really deep sense of terror. Now, I was somebody that used to walk through the bush at night by myself to go to my friends' houses. I didn't scare very easily. I wasn't frightened of the nighttime. But this just caused this huge sense of panic. And I just didn't know what to do. I was too scared to go outside. I wasn't sure what was happening. The other thing to mention is that back at that time, I didn't have access to the internet or anything like that. So I hadn't been exposed to anything sort of UFO related. And that's not what my mind was going to straight away. I just really didn't know what was going on. I just had this feeling of being really small and there being something really large outside. And the night was lit up, 100 times brighter than day, like super, super bright. And just the confusion just set off a panic. And I didn't know what else to do. I had a feeling overcome me like I needed to hide. Obviously, there wasn't anywhere sort of to hide or to go. And I ended up just sort of scrambling back up onto my bed. And my bed was against the wall. So I just sort of sat on my bed against the wall and, could not think of what to do. Panic sort of got stronger. And the light, although I wasn't looking outside, seemed to be intensifying. And the sound and the vibration was getting stronger and stronger. And that feeling of something large above me felt like it was lowering, like something approaching. And I just got this almost, I guess, childish or instinctive sense to hide. So I actually curled up into a ball and pulled the doona completely over to me and faced the wall. And I was just locked up in just extreme terror at that moment. And this whole experience probably lasted for, it wasn't long, maybe a minute and a half, 2 minutes at the most. This whole sort of thing had happened in. And I found myself, it's sort of hard to talk about even now, all this time later, but I found myself just terrified, more terrified than I'd ever been in my life. I've never been even, remotely that scared ever since. And in the peak of that moment, it was like somebody flicked a switch, and suddenly I was laying on my back with my bed fairly well made on top of me in my room, and it was morning. I could hear the sounds of, birds chirping outside and just like any normal morning. And I was aware of the fact that I'd just woken up, but I was immediately aware of the fact that...
Oh, we've lost you. Just for those who don't know what's going on at the moment, we're going through Skype. We're trying a new way of doing this at the moment, and for some reason his phone keeps closing down there to go on. Even though while he's talking on Skype, his phone closes down, and so he has to keep reopening it and keep tapping on the phone. That's why we're hearing those tappings. So anyway, sorry, Kim, you're right, mate. Go for it. Keep going.
Righto, whereabouts did you lose me?
So we found you, mate. You're on your bed there. You're woken up, and you're sort of a bit disorientated, figuring out what's going on. I think we're going, bud.
Yeah. So yeah, I knew like it was morning, and I was aware of the fact that I'd woken up, but I was immediately confused about how I'd been able to fall asleep in the middle of such a like terrifying ordeal. I was just instantly confused, and my mind was immediately back on what had just happened. Now, I've never had that experience before. I've had many a weird dream, and within, seconds of waking up, you kind of think to yourself, oh God, that was a stupid dream, or like, God, that was a weird thing to be dreaming about. I'm very aware of what it feels like to wake up from a dream. This was not like that. This was more like when you go to hospital and you get anesthetic, and then you wake up after anesthetic, you can remember what was happening, before they anesthetized you, and you just have this blank patch where you were out. And it was more like that. I jumped straight up out of bed, and it was like summertime, early in the morning, but sort of very bright and warm outside. And I don't know, I just didn't have that panic that I had the night before. I felt like it was morning, and that clearly whatever was happening was over. And I burst out my back shed door, and my dad was weeding out the garden in the middle of the backyard. And I ran straight over to him, like very distressed, asking him what happened last night. Like, what was that? Did you see it? Did you hear it? And he was looking at me really confused, and he said, what are you talking about? And I said, the night was lit up brighter than day, and the noise. And I sort of went through it with him. He was looking at me really confused, and I said, oh my God, I can't believe you didn't know that happened. And I said, have you had the TV on this morning? And he goes, no, I've just been out here. And I said, God, you got to come inside and turn the TV on. Like, it has to be on the news. Like, something big happened last night. I can't be the only person to have seen it. And he, again, looking at me strange, said, I reckon you must have been bloody dreaming about it. He just couldn't get a grip on what I was saying. So I ran inside. My mum was in the kitchen, and I repeated the same thing to her, who again looked at me very strange. And I said, no, wait, watch this. And I turned the TV on, and I started cycling through channels, and it was just nothing. It was just a totally ordinary day. And I just could not get my head around how that was possible. Like, as far as I was aware, this, huge, phenomenal event had happened, and nobody else seemed to be aware of it. So I've switched the TV off, and I reckon I spent the next hour trying to convince my parents that, what had happened. And the more I talked, the stranger, I think they looked back at me, and they couldn't seem to understand at all what I was talking about. And yeah, just the extreme confusion that I felt. I remember I got myself sorted and went straight around to my, best friend's house, and then started repeating the same thing to him. And he's also sitting back with a very puzzled look on his face, saying, do you reckon maybe you were dreaming, or you might have dreamt it? And that's basically the response I got from people over the next week that I, tried to talk to about it, until in the end, I just got that feeling that everybody around me was starting to think, possibly I'm going a little bit crazy, and I stopped talking about it. Yeah, I spent the next 3 or 4 nights sleeping inside the house until my dad had sort of had enough of making up an extra bed and was saying to me, come on, what's going on? You got your bedroom out there, making up this bed in here. It's stupid, all over some stupid dream. You need to go back out to sleeping in your own room. So I did that. It took me, I reckon, months before I had a relaxed night's sleep. And I was frightened to go out at night and walk the bush on my own like I used to. A lot of things changed for me. And then I guess over time, like around about 6 months to 12 months passed, nothing else happened. And I just started to move on with my life. And I definitely stopped talking about it. I didn't talk about it for, 15, 20 years, I reckon. And then it would be more recently with a lot of the UFO stuff that's been coming out in the media and on the internet over the last sort of 5 to 10 years that convinced me to start bringing this back up and trying to talk about it. So that was something else that I wanted to mention as well, going back to the fact that I hadn't been exposed to any sort of UFO information or documentaries or anything at the time that this happened. And at that time, I was very unsure what had even happened. And then years later, watching UFO documentaries and hearing people talking about like abduction experiences, which still to me doesn't, it still sounds a bit silly. But the way they describe those experiences happening, waking up to a bright light and a noise and the feeling of terror. The first time I seen a documentary where someone was explaining that experience, it made my hair stand on end. It's very, very similar to what had happened. The only difference would be that a lot of those people mentioned that, in the years following their experience that they had, flashbacks or dreams that sort of linked to what happened in that, space of time that they can't remember. I've never had anything like that. Never anything strange ever since. Yeah, nothing strange ever before. It's just very, very, very strange thing that stuck with me. And all these years later, I see so much UFO stuff going on the media that sort of leads me to think that it was definitely something like that happened.
Yeah, it's certainly a life-changing moment for a lot of people, and some worse than others, more than anything. It's just a shame that you sort of didn't get to remember what sort of happened between that moment of you passing out and waking back up.
Yeah. I mean, if you start to go into the hypotheticals of like an abduction type thing, we had a neighbor like one block away. Some of the, I guess, sort of sillier things we talk about is make jokes about with my partner and myself now is, did I wake up and start to witness, the neighbor's abduction and then just
It's a possibility.
put off to sleep and became a unwilling witness or something. But I don't know. I really don't know what to make of it. All that I do know is to be this many years later and to still have like an effect on me now. I mean, I've had many dreams much scarier than that, stupid, weird dreams after watching movies. And like I said, within seconds of waking up, you can immediately dismiss them as just a, stupid or weird dream. This is stuck with me like nothing else that's ever happened to me in my life.
I can imagine. So, do you think it could have been your parents maybe getting abducted instead of your neighbours?
No idea. Like I said, the whole experience was, seeing this light, hearing the sound and extreme emotions of terror. But as for seeing anything else that happened, I didn't see an actual craft. I didn't see any kind of, beings or anything like that. So yeah, I really have no idea what was going on. Just that it was something that, is not possible by our standards of reality. So
yeah, I'm just sort of thinking like going by the sound. I'm making assumptions here, but going by how loud the sound was, how bright it was, I'm thinking it's pretty close proximity to where you were situated. So that's what made me think that your parents might be having an experience.
Yeah, no idea on that side of things. But something else that I did want to mention that I forgot before is when I did get my face up to the window to look out, there didn't seem to be an edge to this thing. Like, I don't know, to explain it, like if you do look into a very, very bright spotlight at night and you look directly into it, it's blinding, but you can see out of your vision, to either side that there's, an area that's lit up and an area that's not. If this was some sort of physical light, it was enormous, because from where I was looking up, I couldn't see the edge of anything. It was just the entire sky just seemed to be blinding white light.
And it was lighting up the
And
surrounding area too, wasn't it?
yeah, like everything. I mean, I've got bush, so I can't see off into the distance. I can probably see around about 40 to 50 meters before I'm looking into solid bush, but I couldn't see any.
Oh, we lost you again. Get a moment there, guys. We're getting back, and I think he's back.
Yeah, back now. So yeah, I could only see around about 40 to 50 meters until I'm looking at sort of solid bush with quite tall trees, but I couldn't see any sort of darkness in the background through the trees. It was just like if you've ever gone outside on an extremely moonlit night and everything's lit up that sort of whitish blue color. It was like that, but 100 times, 1,000 times brighter, like so bright that you could barely even see. And that the noise, if you're ever near something that has a very, very large engine in it, or some kind of, I guess, big power generator, or some kind of big machinery that's just rumbling or rattling, you can tell the sound of something that's big, and the sound of something that's small. And this just had that really big sound, like almost earth shaking. Yeah, I still remember feeling the vibration completely going through my body. It was just an immensely big sound. Not incredibly loud, but like it was, how do you explain it? Just a heavy rumble. Yeah, it just, looking back and at the time, it felt like something very, very large was not too far up above the shed that I was in.
Yeah, it would have been absolutely scary, yes.
I don't know exactly. I think I was more confused than anything, but I don't know whether I might have thought there was some kind of, world-ending event happening outside, some kind of giant meteor.
Yep.
That was burning up and was coming down to slam into the earth. I don't know exactly what set off that, huge amount of panic and terror. I clearly remember standing at the door with my hand on the handle, trying to build up the courage to pop it open and go outside, and I just couldn't do it. Yeah, just terrified, absolutely terrified.
Yeah, so that's what sort of makes me feel that it could have been your parents. So they're trying to stop you from going out your door to go towards where the main house would be. So that's what makes me think that this is your parents having this encounter. And
Yeah.
obviously they don't remember anything or anything in the past maybe that they could have think of and experiences.
No, my dad's a very he's a very reality based person. He's not very open minded at all to anything anything like this, which is why obviously I had such a hard time trying to convince him. But yeah, no stories or anything like that in the family. The only other thing that I ever recall amongst my family would be same area. My three older brothers, and this would have been many years before my experience, were nighttime fishing down at the rocks, and they were watching something moving across the horizon, looking south towards Antarctica, which just looked like a small dot moving along the horizon. And they were chatting about different things while they were fishing, and then the conversation came up about, you see that over there, is that a plane, is it, or is that a satellite? And you sort of talked about it for a bit and then stopped, and it moved all the way across the horizon. And then they said it stopped and sat completely still, which brought their attention back to it and said, that thing stopped. What would it be? Is that a helicopter or what is it? And I think I remember they said something about maybe it had turned and was flying away from them. But they say that while they were focused on it and still talking about it, it went from the left-hand side of the horizon back across in the direction it came from one side of the horizon to the other in like less than a second.
Holy
And
jeez.
so up until my experience, that was the only thing in my family UFO related I'd ever heard about. And, they were just talking about I guess as a kid, to me, what I'd seen as a shooting star, but to them, they'd watched it move across the horizon first. But, and they always swore that, what we saw that night, I have no idea what the hell that was. But it's not really been a big thing in our family, that particular thing. I don't think I've even talked to them about that for a long, long, long time. But yeah, so that was about the only other thing my family was. My mum and dad have never spoken about any kind of strange things or experiences. But yeah, I do remember hearing that as a small kid and asking them once or twice over the years, but we haven't talked about that for a long time.
Yeah, fair enough. Did you wake up with any like sort of weird markings at all, or anything that looked unusual after this that you
No,
took
and
notice?
like I said, if this had have happened to me now, that might have been something that I probably would have done, gone into the bathroom and had a look over myself after watching abduction things on documentaries and all. But like at the time, I just wasn't sure what had happened. I definitely wasn't thinking, that an alien spaceship had been above my shed and possibly abducted me or anything like that. I was really just didn't know what had happened. I couldn't, like most things that happen to you in life, if they're a bit strange or unusual, you start pointing in a direction of what you think it might have been that happened. At the time, I just really had no idea. When I went inside to turn the TV on, I was expecting, some kind of crazy astronomy event, like a giant meteor or something, like something massive had happened. But there was absolutely nothing on the news. Like I said, it wasn't till years later, watching UFO documentaries and things, that sort of moment for moment, my experience did seem to link very, very closely to what, abduction experiences were like.
Yeah, and that's fair enough. That's the thing too. You're always trying to look for a bit of like a clarity or some sort of confirmation of what actually happened. But there never seems to be anything ever, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's something that, for the rest of my life, until the day I die, I'll have no real understanding of what happened. I guess the main reason to want to start talking about it now is because it's a little bit more accepted. People are a bit more open-minded about, strange lights in the night and this kind of thing going on. And in the hope, I guess, that if there's anybody else out there like me that, went through a similar thing and then also like me, just stopped talking about it and haven't talked about it in so long, that, it might spark up somebody else to come forward and, say, hey, that happened to me as well.
Yeah. So where did this happen again?
So Primrose Sands, it's a very small coastal town in southern Tasmania.
Okay. Yep.
And yeah, we lived at the very far end of it on a dead end street. It probably had about maybe 12 to 15 houses on the street and a lot of sort of spare blocks and bush in around those houses.
Yep. So it would have been very
Yeah.
unlikely for someone to have seen it.
Well, it was so big and so bright that, you would think that if anybody was awake anywhere off in the distance, that they would have seen something. Surely that was one of the biggest confusing things about it. Yeah, I just don't know. I don't know how to explain it. I'm just so sure. Like I've never even started to think to myself, maybe I did just dream it, because I know exactly what it feels like to, even when I dream, I like fine details of a dream. Like if you ever dream, that somebody's come to your house and something's going on, you often feel like, well, I was dreaming here, but we weren't here, we were here, or, everything's very rough. Whereas this experience was crystal clear. Like I can remember, very fine details of the sound and the feeling and the emotion. This was not like any dream. And even the waking up and feeling confused, like I almost felt weird that I'd gone to sleep, and I couldn't work out how I'd gone to sleep in the middle of something so terrifying. If you've ever, uh, I guess, overslept your alarm and you need to go to work, and you wake up and you think to yourself, "Oh God, how have I gone to sleep?" And you gotta get up and you got to get going. That was kind of
Yep.
the feeling. Like when I woke up, like I was very aware of this, very real event that was happening that I'd somehow fallen asleep in. That was probably the most confusing point, and that's one of the things I kept repeating over and over, telling people over the days following, that I just cannot work out how I fell asleep when I was so sort of alert and terrified. Just didn't make any sense. The only thing I can think of is that the panic and fear had got to such an intense level that I literally passed out. But yeah, I don't know. It was like I said, it was like when you go in for an operation and you go under anesthetic. That's sort of what it felt like.
Yeah, it would have been the worst
Um,
feeling ever.
yeah, and waking up, like I just had this urgency to like get up and get moving and address what had happened. I was aware that it was early hours of the morning, probably around 2 or 3 o'clock when I'd woke up and gone through this, and I knew it was now sort of 7 in the morning, daylight, and so I'd been asleep, but something had happened, and I was really distressed and needed to find out what had happened, like urgently. Yeah, I've never woken up from any kind of nightmare or dream or anything in that kind of state ever before or ever since. Um, yeah, I don't know. That's that's the whole story. And I've tried to make sense of it uh, many times throughout my life. And yeah, I don't know. The only thing, like I say, that fits the bill is that something very large with very bright lights and a very loud, or again deep or heavy, rumbling or humming sound was directly above the shed that I was in that night.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. If you guys can hear, I've got a bit of a thunderstorm coming through now. So if the power cuts out or show ends for any reason, you'll know why. Because yeah, we've got the old thunderstorm coming through, setting the ambient mood for the tonight's stream. So yeah, guys, just be aware of that one. I've got that coming through. So I do have a couple of questions here. Like I know you've probably covered most of this, but one question is, are you frightened when you think of it?
Yeah, yeah. Like when I try and talk about it openly, or even like I've talked about it with my partner. We've been together now for getting on 7 years, and I've talked about it with her many times. And whenever we start talking about it or I bring it back up, my chest gets tight. I just find it sort of difficult to go back through. Absolutely terrifying. Yeah, I can't even put into words. I've been in some near-death experiences. I've been trapped underwater in a tank at a fish farm, and was drowning and I couldn't get out. And, I struggled and got my way out of that. Those types of things have not had a post traumatic sort of stress effect on me like what this has. Yeah, just even talking about it now. But yeah, very, very uncomfortable. And it puts me right back to just remembering how scared I was.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much a common thing too when it comes to abductions there, and they're not really realizing what's going on. That sort of brings a whole different aspect to their feeling of dread and horror of the realization that something could have possibly gone down that you're knowing. And that's the scariest part about this whole thing. That's the
Yeah,
thing that scares me about the whole UFO abduction thing. Like, they can do this, and we have no choice, no idea, no clue when they're going to do, like how they're going to do this. And that's the scariest part, I feel.
yeah. I think I guess the scariest part for me, and why it is something that's kind of lasted, is because you grow up in the world with an idea of like what's real and what's not real. And when something that you're aware of, something very real, maybe like a big tiger snake or something is near you, it's scary, but it fits with the reality that you're used to.
Yeah.
Um, when something like this happens, it's so far out of anything you've ever learnt about or expected to happen that it's just a different level of terror.
A whole different reality, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's one of those things. Like I think around about 12 months later, I started to feel, I guess, kind of a bit more at ease that maybe it's not ever going to happen again, or hopefully it's not ever going to happen again. And it didn't seem to be. And as the years passed, I became more relaxed, and I'm over my fear of the night, have been for a long time, and I'm back to how I was before. But for a good while after that happened, I was really shaken up.
Yeah, no, that's totally understandable. So next question is also, did anyone else see anything and other reports on the same event with that amount of light in the area?
Not that I'm aware of, but again, no internet. We're also living in a time when if people were to call up, a news station and say that they saw something like this, it's probably unlikely that anything like that would go to air. This day and age, definitely. If people called up and said they seen something strange in the sky, the media likes to, especially the radio stations and that, like to jump on. They often, like to have a bit of a poke and a dig and make a bit of fun on the topic. But you know, back then, you're living in a different time. Like anything like that was mentioned on TV was just the ramblings of a nutcase. Everything was everything was just considered to be in the world of the loopy, if anyone was to mention anything like that. So I don't really know whether anyone else called in or whether anybody's seen anything from a distance. I mean, there's been quite a few things that have happened in Tasmania over the last sort of 50 or 60 years. I remember there was a story of a small craft that came down and landed on a beach. I think it was down in a place called Kettering, and a father and daughter woke up and actually walked down there and were walking around this thing. It was like only small, like the size of a very small car, and then it raised up off the ground and took off into the sky. And I remember hearing about that story when I was a little kid on the media, and just sort of laughing along with my parents, like, what the hell were those people on, as if that really happened, kind of thing.
Yeah,
So I don't know. Yes, it was definitely a different time then than it is now. So if
absolutely.
there were if there were a lot of other people that seen it, I'd say there was a very high probability that a lot of people out there either wouldn't have been taken seriously, or if they saw something really strange like that, would have been reluctant to even tell anybody about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's sadly still that stigma that's in the media today, or even in people in general, and hopefully we can sort of move away from that and take it a bit more seriously. But I think as time goes on, I'm sure it'll happen. But hopefully they'll realise, with the Americans there come out with the admitting to these things existing. So, of course they're not admitting aliens, but UFOs of all
Yeah,
things. People were laughing at the fact that UFOs existed, and now they're here. So why keep
and then
laughing?
yeah, the weirdest thing is that if you see some sort of post online, for example, there's a Facebook group called Tasmanian History, and somebody put a post on there the other day asking whether anyone had ever seen any UFOs or anything in Tasmania, and the ridicule that just blew up in the comment section of people that are just living in this reality that they just simply don't exist, and that it's all just made up fantasy. And I put a comment on there saying, you are aware of the media releases by the US government over the last couple of years about their actual footage and radar data. And I don't think anyone's really, the majority of people haven't even really taken any notice of it. It's just been so deeply ingrained to brush it off as crazy talk that even when you see an official, news report or a story on it, most people just immediately tune out, and I don't even think they take the information in.
I wouldn't be surprised either. It's a shame though, but I really hope people do sort of take on board what's going on around them. These things are around. But anyway, we can keep going this for ages with this sort of the realization that people need to go and understand that goes on, and the fact that they also keep going into drugs and that, thinking people, oh yeah, they're on drugs and whatever and crap, and they're just all high and seeing shit, and it's like, nah, man, not everyone's on drugs, and people are still
Yeah,
seeing things. So
the weird thing is too, when something that like what happened to me happens, you yourself understand how far out of like the normal it is, and you immediately, when you're trying to tell people about it, are already expecting them to have a very hard time to try and wrap their mind around, you know, trying to believe what you're saying, really did happen, because yourself, it's really, really strange.
yeah,
So yeah, it's a difficult thing.
it is. It's absolutely very difficult, and I think it's why people are struggling a little bit to come forward with their sort of encounters. Even though they're starting to get a bit more courage now because people are coming forward a lot more, but there's still a lot more people there that have experienced something that's still holding back a little bit. And hopefully, with shows like this one here, and I believe podcasts and other shows that you know encourages more people to come out with their encounters, experiences, and show what they have seen, basically.
Yeah, I mean, if you really start digging on the internet, there are quite a few properly reported and like newspaper articles of sort of UFO sightings and experience over the years, but they're not given much attention even now with a lot of these new sort of documentaries and things that are coming up about things that have happened in Australia. Like, for example, there was a reverend in the town of Cressy in Tasmania, and there's a like locally famous story there of him and his wife seeing a huge craft with small craft flying around it. And
Yep.
When you really look into that story, like that's absolutely incredible and by very credible witnesses, but you still haven't seen that one on any like major documentary or anything like that. So
Yeah.
it's surprising what's out there when you really start digging in.
Oh, it's a rabbit hole. You can go deep diving as far right down to the bottoms of the ocean, I reckon, and still keep going. But anyway, another one that's we've probably got a few late bloomers come in, and they're asking some questions regarding your experience there. So we
Yep.
have covered some of these, but one's asking that do you think you might have been taken or family involved in this whole abduction?
Uh, So again, like I've not ever had a dream that like, links to any kind of experience or had any kind of flashbacks or anything at all that makes me think that anything other than the fact that I just seem to have passed out and woke up in the morning happened to myself personally. My parents, I mean, I would think if they had been aware of anything strange that had happened that night when I was confronting them in the morning, trying to tell them what I'd seen, they would have said something. If they weren't aware of it, and then, years later, we're having some sort of flashbacks or weird things themselves, I'm fairly certain that they'd be open enough to talk about, something a bit weird going on. My dad, maybe not so much. My mum, definitely. But my dad has changed a lot over the years as he's got older. But yeah, I mean, I've brought this back up to them a few times over the years, and they've never really looked at it as anything other than, that was that night you got up carrying on when you had that weird dream or whatever. So yeah, there's never been any signs from my family or, like I said, any experiences from myself that make me think anything like that happened. I have obviously heard about the sort of hypnotherapy regression type thing. And that's a really strange one as well, because I guess if something did happen, I just wonder whether or not the rest of my life would be a bit more comfortable if I don't know, if that
Yeah,
makes
that's
any
one of those
sense.
things, eh?
Yeah, yeah, I'm not sure that's something that I really want to know if something like that did happen.
Yeah, you don't want all the flashbacks
Yeah,
of things that have been happening to you, and they could have been like really extremely bad things, and like that would be
yeah.
pretty
I mean,
traumatizing.
the experience was sort of scary enough as it was, let alone to have somebody sort of manage to fish out any additional memories of anything even more terrifying.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Another one's asking the like the same that you. I'm sure you would have heard this too, but like yeah, there's sort of like a bit of a family contract that goes through with a lot of people that get abducted, and they're asking like, have you looked into maybe breaking the contract to stop being abducted? But seeing as it's your only abduction, it might not be a contract involved.
Yeah, I'm not really sure exactly what they mean there. I mean, I guess.
No, we've lost you.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, you're right.
If it had happened sort of multiple times, I would start to, I guess, maybe think that myself or my family were being targeted by something like that, being just a complete one-off. I'm not really sure sort of what to think of it on that side of things. Maybe maybe they took me once and then realized I wasn't cut out for what they needed.
Yeah, no, that's one way of looking at it.
And then went, no, this one's no good.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah,
kicking back.
yeah. I don't know. I've never had the sense where I've genuinely felt that that I was abducted or anything like that. And I feel like in all this time after, and especially seeing so many things on documentaries, I feel like something would feel familiar, or there'd be some kind of flashback. I really don't know.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough too. We sadly don't remember everything, which is probably a good thing in most cases. But yeah, anyway. So another one is if I can find where I was going through there now, and down the bottom here, right? Yep. So in hindsight, as you have moved along through the years, what do you think the phenomenon was? If you're able to put your finger on it, mental, physical, metaphysical, dimensional, etc.
Uh, like I said, the closest thing that fits what I could hear and see, and that scared feeling of being something small, feeling like there was something incredibly large above me, I would say the it all points in the direction that maybe there was some kind of very large UFO hovering above the house, maybe an extremely large one hovering over the entire town. It sounded very, very big and had an enormous and powerful light. So I guess that's all I've really, and I'm still not 100% sure, that it even is like a UFO type thing. But that's the only thing in my life since that happened that seems to fit what I was experiencing that night. So if I had to guess what I think it most likely was, then I would say, yeah, maybe a very large craft hovering quite close above the house or the houses. And I don't know, my feeling of terror, it's hard to judge, like whether something in the sound or something was setting off that terror, or whether that terror was just a natural reaction to something so far out and so far out of like normal. Yeah, I don't know whether something was causing me to panic like that. Like I said, I wasn't somebody that got scared too easily. I definitely wasn't scared of the night and being out in the night by myself. I guess before that had ever happened, if someone else was to tell me that happened, I would have said, God, why didn't you go outside and have a look? That sort of thing. But when you're in that moment, yeah, I don't know. I just had this, I guess I felt like if I opened the door and went outside, I was exposed to whatever this was. And yeah, I just couldn't go out. I just become completely overcome with fear. And like, as I said before, that moment of fear, like stopping me from going outside, to when I backed up and then got onto my bed and pulled the covers over me, just kept escalating and escalating. And, the vibration and sound seemed to just be getting more intense. It just felt like whatever it was getting closer. And I just went into just absolute terror, like terrified panic. And then just bang, like that, I was laying on my back in a reasonably well-made bed in the morning, and I just could not figure out how that happened.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you've heard stories, but I've heard where people have gone like say gone bushwalking or something like that, or they've just gone to a certain area, and they just had this overwhelming dread that just come over them, like this horrible feeling sensation just washed straight over them. And then they sort of kept trying to walk towards where they originally wanted to go, and the feeling just gets stronger and it turns into absolute terror, and they just know that if they keep continuing, something bad is going to happen, and so they just can't go any further.
Yeah, I mean
So they turn around and just go back, and then as soon as they go past that certain point, the whole feeling and sensation just disappears.
that was, I guess, the sort of the feeling that I had. I was terrified, and I felt like something, I didn't know what, but something really, really bad was about to happen, or was happening, and I couldn't go out. And then it was like a spider being trapped in a jar inside that shed. I had no idea whether I was safe in there, or whether making a run for it was the better option. I just didn't really know what to do. I had this really overwhelming sense to try and hide or get away, but I there was nowhere to go. And I always think to myself how sort of pointless or silly it was to get onto my bed and cover myself with my blankets. What's that going to do? But instinctively, it was the only thing that I could think of doing. If anything, it was just to block out my own vision of what was happening.
Yeah, well, it's obviously worked in a sense, I suppose. Like, I think that's one of our things. Like we do have those emotions there, fight or flight, and I think one of those ones that hit you was the flight and trying to retreat as far as you could.
Yeah, and like to go back to like halfway through, when I'd looked up and seen the bright light and heard the sound, when I made that decision to turn and like walk towards the door and sort of burst the door open and make a run for the back door and start yelling out, help or something to my parents, I was very committed to that. But right as I got to the door and put my hand on the handle, I don't know whether my senses sort of just sharpened even more, and I just had a second thought of what happened, but I just could not open that door, and my chest locked up, and the terror just really, really came on hard at that point. So I don't know whether something seemed to stop me from going out there, or whether, again, like that was just my natural instinct. Once I'd had just a couple of more moments to sort of process it as I was about to step out, that I changed my mind. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. So before we start in the show, there, mate, I've got one last question there for you. So what do you think these things actually are? These UFOs? What's your whole idea or perspective on the whole UFO genre, or who's controlling these crafts?
All right, so I think obviously going through this experience when I was younger, and so much information available out there now, so many documentaries and access to eyewitness accounts, I think it has to be, intelligent life out there somewhere. Whether or not, the people that are monitoring our perimeters into space are being entirely truthful, and are not telling us when they're seeing these things zipping in and out, or whether they're just simply not detecting them. But I think it has to be something. I mean, there has to be intelligent life out there. And if it's been around for, a lot longer than we have zero chance of understanding what kind of technology they would have access to. It would make sense to have a sticky beak and look around, maybe run some experiments on different life that they found out there. If they're, thousands of times more advanced than us, it would also make sense that they don't really have any interest in wanting to communicate with us, or, share information. I can't see that we would have anything at all to offer an intelligent race that, would be that far in front of us. So, I don't know. I just think it all points to, we're just being checked out and looked at by other life out there. And when you see so many of the documentaries with such massive descriptions in the shape and size of the crafts that people are seeing, or even the entities that people claim to see, maybe we're being checked out by multiple different intelligent races out there. Who knows? But that would be my guess as to what the UFO thing is all about. I mean, everything points towards it. There's people that say maybe it's an earthly thing that's been here all along. I don't think that really makes sense. If there was some kind of advanced intelligence here on Earth and it's always been here, I can't see what purpose or function it would have here. I think it makes more sense that it's life coming from elsewhere and just calling in here to have a look. That's what I think's happening.
Yeah, no, that's a fair opinion too. There's so many out there, and whether it's the right one or not, we'll maybe find out in this lifetime, but hopefully eventually.
Yeah.
It'll be good just to get it out there.
Some people like to think that they're kind of watching over us, like if they're going to military installations and working out how to shut down our nuclear weapons to stop us from, blowing each other up and all of that sort of stuff. And that I see that is possible, but I also think that it's maybe just a point of interest to them to come down and see to what level of advancement, our defenses are and our technology, our very high-tech military bases around the world would definitely be points of interest if you were wanting to study, primitive technology, which would be how they would see it, I would guess, just to see where we're at. So I'm not sure whether they're fully looking out for us. You think if they were, they might have stopped some of the pretty horrible things that have happened over the last 50 or 60 years or even further back. So
yeah, absolutely. Even just the first initial World War, do you think that it was like, nah, just hold up, guys. You're doing this all wrong.
Yeah,
it would have been a great start.
They reckon they showed up when our nuclear bombs and that were going off and all. I really think that it's probably just a point of interest, just to come and see what's happening, have a bit of a look and check out what the noise was.
It could have been too.
I'm not sure that they're really that overly concerned with us if they are out there. If they were of some sort of caring, overwatching, concerning type nature, I feel that there would be motivation there to make contact and to try and help us, which, as far as we know, that sort of hasn't happened. So,
Yep, no, that's a fair point too. So, but yeah, look, mate, we'll end it there, mate. And look, mate, thank you very much for coming on the show. It was absolutely great having you on here. Absolutely amazing experience. And yeah, sadly, it's nothing too memorable in your aspect. Like obviously the whole initial experience, but nothing between that.
I've learned to live with it now. Obviously, it was a long time ago, and nothing's ever happened since, which was a good thing. So, I'm sort of quite comfortable now. It's a little bit uncomfortable recollecting that and going back through it, but in day-to-day life, I'm sort of all good now. So,
no, mate, that's good. I hope it stays that way too, because you just don't know what was on that other side.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having me on and giving me the opportunity to share my story. Sorry for cutting in and out, or if I went back over details, or hopefully it all made sense.
Yeah, no, mate, that's fine, mate. That's sort of a bit of my fault on that end there, because I'm trying out this new Skype thing, trying to get away from using Facebook Messenger, because when I've been streaming there, you can hear my messages coming through from my Facebook page, and that's just, get notifications all through the bloody stream. It's like, get rid of that. So I'm trying something different, trying to work a way around it. And Zoom obviously costs money, so I'm not trying to avoid that one. But anyway, it's a trial and error thing.
We got the communication clear enough for people listening. So
yeah, definitely. I hope it was coming through clear enough. Anyway, because the storm coming through that might have played up with the internet a little bit there, but. No, hopefully it's all there. It's all been recorded anyway, guys. So it is on the podcast. But thank you, Kim.